Hello, everybody. It's been a little while, but here I am, sufficiently triggered by an Alex O'Connor video that I'm sitting down to make a little response. And it's going to be a kind of lazy response. We're just going to play the video, pause it, talk. And actually, I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that over the last half decade, while I've been in school, which by the way ends tomorrow. I'll probably do a master's degree, but the bachelor's degree ends tomorrow. Uh, you've probably noticed that my content has been, it's dropped off. There hasn't been much of it. And the content I have made has been lazy, that's not a bad thing. It's just been conversations. And I guess there's one essay style video I can think of with Troy about proving a negative. But, to have conversations with Lance or Joe or whoever else I've been talking to, the work to do something like that is in learning the concepts, right? Actually sitting down to have the conversation is just having a fun chat for an hour of my life. That's not exactly work. So that's what I mean by lazy. And yeah, it's just because school is too demanding on my brain. I don't have the energy or desire or whatever to really do this kind of stuff when I'm caught up in school. That said, I've been working on a huge project, which I'm not really going to get into here. People in the Discord have some sense of what's going on, but yeah, there's tens of thousands of lines of code at this point. There's some very awesome, there's some fucking crazy sweet stuff coming down the pipeline. And now that I'm done this degree, I've got a handful of months here to work on this stuff before I start that master's degree. And I've got no income. So, I haven't been asking for money for a while because I haven't been really working on content. I don't like to ask for money when I'm not doing shit, but I am doing shit right now. So if y'all want to support me over the summer, that would be awesome. Patreon me some money so I can work on this epic shit that's coming. And no, it's not just video. So that's all I'll say on that. Why am I making this video here? Well, I rolled out of bed and woke up to this Alex video that's been making the rounds, and I guess my channel is one of those channels that has been kind of keeping Alex in check for a while. I'm sure you've seen some of the other stuff, and this particular video just frustrated me a bit. The thing that frustrates me, I'll try to describe before we get into the video, because it's also going to provide framing for how I'm looking at this whole video. Alex made a video a while back where he abandoned veganism. So he returned to supporting the Holocaust, and he's been extremely evasive. So the top comment, or a top comment on that video, on the Twitter post he made about it, on his community post, was me saying you should talk to a vegan who's both competent and will press you on this. Because a little thing you guys should know, people will try to kind of make it seem like they've addressed a topic by talking to someone who's competent, but who won't actually really press them in a meaningful way, like talking to Peter Singer or something. Now, obviously, I'm sure I have a ton of vegans here who are not very impressed with Peter Singer, but just from a general, I don't know, layperson, philosophy noob, whatever kind of point of view, he's got a PhD in philosophy. He's a huge figure in the animal movement. That's going to hit most people's radar, like Alex is sort of doing his diligence and engaging with the important voices. But again, you got to have the two factors. You have to be both competent and actually willing and intending to push Alex meaningfully on it, right? Just talking to someone who's going to push you but who can't defend their view, well, that's worthless. Just talking to someone who's competent but who's not going to push you, that's also kind of worthless. You'll notice actually with people like Darth Dawkins, once you get the combo, he'll never talk to that person, but he'll love just dunking on someone who's pushing him really hard but can't actually argue very well, or someone who can argue very well but isn't pushing him hard, right? In the latter case, he gets all the credit of talking to an expert without any pressure on his own views. In the former case, he gets all the credit of just destroying someone on the topic. But the combination, yeah, that you're never going to see that kind of engagement. My audio's clipping a bit, whatever. I'm not going to restart. I think I'm talking kind of loud. Yeah, so I also sent him some emails at that time. So yeah, the top comment on a lot of that stuff was me saying, hey, you got to talk to someone like me or like Avi, who knows the topic and is going to push you. And I emailed him also, and we've talked over that email a handful of times before. I know he gets those emails. I emailed him twice saying as much, talking about the importance of doing one's intellectual due diligence, and he ghosted all of that. So the way that I look at Alex is sort of a weak, feeble, pathetic person who doesn't want to be held to account for his own personal support of the Holocaust. And yeah, so that's basically my angle on him. And that's going to kind of inform how I look at this video, okay? Because he's not saying things in this video explicitly as a justification for not being vegan, but he's not vegan. And I want, again, it doesn't look like I'm ever going to get a conversation with him for what I think we all can see are very fucking obvious reasons here. But I want to analyze this video from that kind of angle. I want to look at, does anything that you're saying justify your personal support of this horror? And the answer is going to be a very obvious no, I think. So yeah, let's play this and let's respond from that kind of angle.
When you start looking at how we actually treat animals, I mean, how do you feel about, factory farming, for example? How do you feel about the way that we get our food?
I would hate to say it's a somewhat necessary evil.
Necessary for what?
Feeding people. I would love to see maybe something more sustainable. I know crickets have been, talked about quite a lot, doing cricket protein.
There's also more sustainable versions of the same foods we're already eating, or less torturous. I mean, for example, in my country, over 80% of pigs that are reared for food are in gas chambers. Carbon dioxide, they're lowered in cages into chambers of carbon dioxide, where you can watch the footage of this online. It's not just putting them to sleep. Now, we do actually know that there are other gases we can use.
Again, just remember as he says all this, that he causes this to happen. Now, again, like, since you can't press him directly, you can't ask, are you eating pigs? I don't know if he is maybe not eating pigs specifically, but, he's causing this or similar things to this, while saying this.
That would be less painful, that they wouldn't cause them to squeal around, choking on their own breath. Invisible gas as well, so they probably just only adds to the confusion. Just an unimaginable cruelty for these animals. Now, maybe it's the case that for whatever reason, we need to be pigs for food. We need bacon, we need it for whatever reason. If that's the case, which is dubious already.
Dubious is probably an understatement. He also, well, yeah, we'll just say that.
Why don't we use another gas which is less painful? Well, because it's more expensive. Okay, so it's sort of like, when you say it's a necessary evil, it might be necessary to animals for food. It might be necessary to rear maybe even lots of animals for food. And it may be necessary sometimes not to treat them ideally because...
So this is all strange to me. Maybe necessary to raise animals for food. Why? Why would we possibly think that? Maybe he doesn't... I'm trying to be really charitable. Maybe he doesn't believe that himself and he's just speaking to their view. But yeah, there's been no reasoning given in favor of that, so not sure why we would think something like that. And if you look at the health research, it's abundantly clear that we can be healthy just, not eating the tortured corpses of Holocaust victims. There's no need to do that. Why not just eat a fucking plant?
Because of the amount of food that we need. But the current practices of factory farming are sort of beyond the pale.
So what do you think is a solution for that practice of farming? Well, is there one? Is it even possible?
Again, notice how impersonal this will all be. He'll be fine talking about things that are solutions, things society can do, but never is it about him, right? Or rarely, or when it is, it's a brief flickering little in the wind, right? So that should say something about his psychology. What exactly is, again, kind of hard to determine. It would be easier if I could sit down and actually speak with him for a bit. It would become more clear. It could be that he's kind of repressing it. It could be he's deliberately avoiding talking about it. Not entirely clear, but yeah, there's people who will kind of signal approval from veganism, but never turn the spotlight on themselves in any meaningful way. And again, that kind of connects to this theme of just being, weak and pathetic.
Possible to humanely.
Like, how? Whatever. It's just to me. It's just a fundamentally like disgusting character failure to not be able to introspect honestly on this kind of stuff. Like, from my point of view, I mean, it's possible someone's confused, but if someone's not vegan and they've been exposed to the information, they understand what they're causing, which, Alex clearly we'd have to talk about the causal chain and exactly what he thinks is going on there, but I mean, he at least knows what the end result is. This might be a bit of a generalization, but like a non-psychopath who's made aware of what's happening and who understands how they're complicit in it, and doesn't change, I can't attribute that to anything but some kind of character deficiency. I mean, again, technically you could come up with other explanations, but it signals to me a sort of undeveloped person who's not capable of the sort of introspection that you would want in a situation like that. If you're not a psychopath, you're going to have a problem with this kind of stuff. And if you understand you're the cause of it, then you're going to want to prevent whatever horrible, brutal torture you're the source of, right? And if you're not doing that, it's just kind of like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Are you not able to introspect honestly? Are you not able to put down the burger? I don't know. I'm not sure, but it seems very plausibly just a sort of pathetic character weakness. You just haven't developed right as a person. You can't introspect honestly. You can't put down the burger. I don't know. It's just kind of disgusting to me.
Breed and
I mean, I would be ashamed of myself. I'd be deeply, deeply ashamed.
Raise animals for farming.
Well, humane is a tricky word to use there because, of course, to the extent that you're unnecessarily an animal, it's difficult to describe that as humane. I certainly think that if
bleep killing
is a tricky word to use there because, of course, to the extent that you're unnecessarily an animal.
I hate YouTube. I hate this platform.
Well, it's difficult to describe that as humane.
This is part of why I'm doing my own thing. I'm tired of being censored. I've had such ridiculous bullshit happen. I had a video of Avi destroying Nick Fuentes taken down. I tried to get the YouTube to respond. They wouldn't answer questions as simple as, is it wrong to put up a video criticizing a Hitler speech? So yeah, the ridiculous thumb of this retarded fucking corporation, or sorry, of this corporation. I see how I bleep myself. Yeah, over me is just intolerable and is one of the reasons I'm coding up my own thing. Fuck this stupid platform, or this stupid platform.
I certainly think that if the industry is going to change, I used to be a vegan, and I used to think that the solution to this was just to not eat the products, to not pay for the products. It's essentially a boycott. Boycotts work, at least sometimes.
Notice we're talking about solutions to the entire problem rather than personal responsibility, right? There could be a personal responsibility you have, which is not a solution to a problem globally. For instance, I personally should not rape children. Will my personal abstinence from child rape, does abstinence suggest that I have any desire to? I don't know if that's weird phrasing, but I don't want to rape children in the first place, if that's not obvious. But my personal non-engagement in that activity, that doesn't fix the global problem, but it's certainly still an obligation for me, isn't it?
Boycotts can be effective. And for a time,
again, it's this impersonalizing, making it about systems, about things bigger than oneself. That's the psychological weakness, the inability or unwillingness to turn the spotlight inward and point it at yourself and your own character.
Veganism was really beginning to take off. It seemed like it was really changing the world, and you become really convinced that the world one day will actually be vegan, that morality will catch up on the world, and in the same way that all kind of other injustices like human slavery.
And to be clear, I'm doubtful about veganism being the solution. As I mean, again, long-term viewers know this. I've said this stuff for many years. Why are we doing, again, he's not explicitly saying this. I know how annoying YouTube is, where anytime I don't hedge something, someone will assert that I'm making some kind of error. And it's like, okay, I could have hedged that. There's never enough hedging for YouTube, but it seems like we're doing a kind of false dichotomy here. We're like, oh, it's top down or it's bottom up, and bottom up isn't going to work, so it's top down, and I can just go and rape all the children I want right now till the top down solution comes. How about it's not a choice between the two? We just do both. What a revolutionary idea. Oh my god, it's not like we do that on literally fucking every other topic. Like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Are abolished. The same thing will happen with animal exploitation. By the way, more human beings are in slavery today than were at the height of the transatlantic slave trade. It's just that at least now we condemn it and try to root it out. I'm just not convinced that's going to work anymore. And I don't think that people will stop eating animals. And I don't...
Again, just the distinction. Fixing the problem in its entirety versus doing one's own... meeting one's own obligation not to contribute to it, right?
Think that it's wrong in the way that I used to in principle, because you sort of...
Let's catch that. Let's back up.
I'm just not convinced that's going to work anymore. And I don't think that people will stop eating animals. And I don't think that it's wrong in the way that I used to in principle, because you sort of...
He doesn't think it. Gotta be careful about using words like it and that and stuff. It's something I'm not perfect at, but that I try to watch, because it becomes hard to tell what the subject is. Is it eating animals or paying for animal products? Is that what he's saying he doesn't see a problem with now, in virtue of this, in virtue of the fact that the bottom up stuff is unlikely to solve the problem? He doesn't see a problem with the action. Are we seriously doing... I gotta call this video something like "The Descent to Level 0 Continues."
The big end of the funnel when it comes to veganism is factory farming footage. You know, you show people... I talk just how I've spoken to you now about these abominable practices. And so you say, okay, I want to do something about this. And then maybe you become a vegan. And then there's a lot of debate about, well, what if we kill the animals in a different way?
Oh, guys, I'm so sorry. I realize I've been playing this through my speakers. You've probably been hearing double sound. I don't know how bad it's been. Again, we're doing the lazy thing, because I don't have the motivation to... Well, it's not that I don't have the motivation. I'm focused on other stuff, and I don't have a ton of time to do a video, so you're just going to have to deal with that quality problem. But I have headphones on now, so it'll be better for this last bit, I guess.
What if I've got backyard chicken farming? And there's a big discussion now. What if I've got chickens in my back garden? You know, what if I eat their eggs? Can that be a problem? And people will still say, well, okay, they've still been selectively bred to lay more eggs than they would naturally, which often gives them a calcium deficiency, which leads to things like osteoporosis in chickens, which is bad, but it's nowhere near as bad or as as much of an emergency as factory farming, right? And so suddenly you're having these much more sort of nuanced debates about animal ethics, about what you have the right to do, because you've first you've gotten through the door with the obvious stuff. The first thing we need to do is convince people of the obvious stuff. This is inexcusable. There's no excuse for the way that we are sort of treating pigs in factory farms at the moment. There's simply...
Yeah, it's inexcusable. So why would you cause it to happen?
No.
Again, is the answer to that supposed to be because me not causing it to... So the question is why would... What did I just say? Let me play that back. I fucked myself up with double negatives.
Excuse for the way that we are sort of treating pigs in factory farms at the moment. There's simply no excuse. If this is the only...
Yeah, it's inexcusable. So what? So why would you cause it to happen? Is the answer to that supposed to be, well, it doesn't matter because it's not my personal causing of whatever fraction of this horror I cause, is not me preventing that is not going to end the whole thing. So, you know, whatever. Is that what we're getting? I mean, it's not being explicit, so it's hard to know, but that's the kind of vibe that I'm getting.
Way to produce bacon.
Also, keep in mind, in his video, he was talking about stuff like it just being difficult to be not vegan. So, you know, it's hard to, which is also bullshit, but, you know, it's hard to not think like, you know, is all this motivated by a character weakness and an inability to, whatever. I've made the point. I'll just keep going.
And to the extent that we currently eat it, then eat less. Right? It's just not even close. It makes a parody of ethics.
It makes a parody of ethics, yet you do it? You make a parody of ethics?
The solution, I think, needs to be something like what happened with the environmentalist movement. You remember sort of 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, everybody's saying, make sure you switch off your lights, make sure you don't leave the tap running, because if you leave that running for a year, it can fill up an Olympics.
I don't like this. I mean, turn off the lights and stuff. I'm not saying he's analogizing in this way, but let's just notice there's a huge difference between turning off a light and causing someone to be stabbed or causing someone to be thrown in a gas chamber. The individual portion of the thing that you should be avoiding, we might argue there's a slight difference in significance there, right?
Swimming pool, and so you're sort of doing your little bit, and then people begin to realize actually that's not really
doing your little bit. That's the analogy. Again, why are we just looking at the big picture and how big a dent you make in the big picture? Why aren't we looking at what your personal obligations are?
Solving the problem. What we need to do is we need to go and like lobby Shell to stop whatever.
And again, it's because it makes it all not about you, and it lets you do whatever you want. Oh, it's some corporation. It's about some interest groups lobbying corporations, and meanwhile, I'll just get to raping. Great, awesome.
Whatever the hell it is that Shell do. We need to stop governments from investing in fuel licenses. We need to get universities to divest their investments in fossil fuel industries, for example. It's much more now about protesting authority and trying to make systematic change happening from the top down. And now the idea of the environmentalist whose principal focus is trying to convince people to remember to turn their lights off kind of seems almost a bit silly. It's like, really, like that's going to solve the problem?
Principal focus, again, you might be like, okay, I think it's a dual solution, top down and bottom up, and the principal focus should be top down, like in terms of our activism efforts. Maybe you think most of our dollars and time should be going into that. A position like that could be reasonable, right? There's maybe the main things we should be doing are like out competing it economically with lab grown meat and like trying to lobby government. Like, I don't know. Again, even if you think that's the bulk of what we should be doing, there's still your personal obligation. And if we do the either or thing, we end up in a false dichotomy because it's not either or, right? You can personally not rape an infant and also think that the way to really make some progress on eliminating infant rape is, through law. I mean, that's when we already have laws against, but you get the point.
Well, maybe, yeah, sure. If everybody did that, maybe we'd have less of a problem. But the way to do this is clearly systematic top-down change. And I think the same thing maybe needs to happen.
The way to do this. Why aren't we talking about percentages?
With veganism. I'm not entirely sure about this. I'm open to be convinced either way. But I think that whereas people might have said, we just need to stop eating these products, maybe it's now actually, no, let's go and lobby the government to make this a criminal offense.
Now, how would that differ with crickets? Because let's just say one cow could feed 10 people versus 10,000 crickets.
Yeah.
Feeding the same 10 people, and like 10,000 crickets have to and be kept in in their own filth.
We're bleeping die. That's the level we're at. We're bleeping the word die.
Filth and this and that. Like, how would it differ from the perspective of just suffering life?
It's going to depend on your view of like consciousness of crickets, right? Because intuitively, I want to say that a cow is worth many more.
Well, assuming consciousness is something you value, but
much more than a cricket. Many more crickets are worth the same as a cow. But that's a very difficult thing to quantify. It's like when we actually try to put a number on it, it's impossible. Like, how many cows would you save one dog? Like, man, I don't know. Like 3.5. Like, who knows, right?
Yeah. The correct answer is 1.75.
right. Yeah. I think that the cricket thing is interesting, right? Because what's the solution? If we're not eating cows, what if we're going to eat thousands of crickets? Well, look, why not let's start by like eating cows, but not rearing them on factory farms.
Start by eating cows. So start by raping children, but in nice, comfortable water beds.
How about that? Why don't we sort of try to create more organic ways of farming these animals, at least as a start, right? Like, in other words, there are not two options. If you really don't want to do away with the eating of animal products, it's not like your only options are forcing pigs into gas chambers or eating thousands of locusts. There's sort of a middle ground to be had there, right? And so what I'm saying here is, for a start, at least, systematic governmental change. It should be a criminal offense to do all kinds of things that are currently legal. Because, by the way, the things I'm describing here are legal, right? And most factory farms aren't even following the regulations. You know, every single time somebody breaks in with a camera, puts a camera on the side of a factory farm and like exposes what's going on, it's so much worse. It's so much worse. And I'm describing what you can legally do, and that's if everybody's following the rules. People like Joey Carbstrong for years have been breaking into farms. I suppose.
Yeah, this is a good point. You know, what's legal is already total moral failure, like of just such epic proportions, which Alex contributes to. But additionally, you can expect a kind of bell curve or something of behavior around what's legal. Like whatever the limit is on what's legal, you're going to have a bunch of behavior that's going past that limit, probably to, you know, the further past the limit you go, the less you're going to see of it. But yeah, it's worth noting that what's legal, yeah, you should almost picture like a bell curve or something around that, extending out on both sides in terms of what you're actually going to see in practice.
Quite considerable risk in putting cameras on the side and showing people what happened.
Also, side note about Joey, I used to help Joey with stuff like logic and with some of these arguments. You can still see my influence in a lot of the ways he argues for stuff. But when he had that whole thing with Paul at AV and with Richard, I sent a respectful message. He and I would talk somewhat regularly. And I told him I think he should talk to Richard and Paul. That was really what I said. I think I even made it a voice message, so it was like friendly. And he has never talked to me since. Anything I've ever said to him, he's ignored. He actually deliberately ignores super chats that mention me or Avi. So yeah, I don't know what is up with Joey. You know, whatever vegan stuff he's doing, that's good. But I think he might have some kind of, I don't know. I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, cutting yourself off from philosophical engagement and just kind of ossifying your views like that is fairly cringe from my point of view.
And it's not nice.
But I mean, at least there's some engagement. On the other hand, we have people like Ed, which again, I'm glad for whatever vegan stuff he's doing, but you try to contact someone like Ed, and it's like there's this layer of like his management team and stuff, and there's no way through to him, and he's still running like 2016 era arguments. He's like that. It's like someone running fucking like Windows Vista or something. Like, also fuck Windows, but that's another thing. Fuck Mac. Fuck all that. Everyone Linux, guys. Come on. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get way into this here, but part of what one should want to do as a content creator is treat their criticism system like an engineering problem, right? The YouTube comment section is basically a sewage pipe pointed at your face. I have it turned off for a reason. Which is not to say most people shit on me. There's lots of people. It's mostly supportive, but I just don't like the blind support. I don't like the blind criticism, and most of all, I don't like the posturing fucking piece of shit who, when challenged to actually defend their view, just ramble more in text. I will not platform that. That's why I don't have a comment section. But yeah, you should want to treat your criticism system like an engineering problem where the good stuff can get through to you. And you guys will see what I'm building on that front. But that's a whole other topic.
And so at the very least, this kind of stuff should be a criminal offence. Yeah, in the UK, you have to stun an animal before you can kill it. It's a legal requirement that you have to stun an animal before you kill it for food. Now, the UK government considers gas chambers to be a form of stunning at the same time, if you like, two birds with one stone, or two pigs in one gas chamber. And so this practice is allowed where, like, you know, if the pig didn't die, it might well be illegal because you've just sort of gassed a pig and it hasn't died. And also, if you just like that pig without stunning it, you'd have committed a criminal offense.
So how do you assign your value hierarchy to life?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that question because, as I was alluding to a moment ago, you know, it's very difficult to actually give an analysis of why things are valuable. Right? Every time you try to do it, It's very difficult. So there's this argument called name the trait, which is used in the
Oh boy.
context of animal ethics, which is to say, give me the thing that's true of a pig or a cow.
Note that Alex doesn't seem to have a good answer to this and will not answer it here.
That if it were true of a human, you'd be okay with a human for food.
This is exactly what I would press Alex on if I could actually get a conversation with him, which I used to be able to do. And if you watch that old conversation, I mean, you'll see that I've actually, in that conversation, I pressed him. I made a follow-up video. I basically broke his view on morality. He was saying stuff like that there aren't irreconcilable value differences. I basically shat all over that and smashed that view apart fairly easily. And he's at one point I heard him say that my critique was astute. That's the most I ever heard. But he kind of, as far as I can tell, seemed to quietly skulk away from that view and never give credit where it's due. Which I don't really care that much about credit. I help people, all the time behind the scenes, never talk about it, though I'm doing it right now. So maybe I'm a hypocrite. But yeah, there's something about like, he knows that I'm a good reasoner. The last time we spoke, I broke the whole view he was going around arguing for. That was like his big thing, right? He probably knows the conversation is a liability because he's seen what happens when he tries to argue with me. And I suspect that that is part of why he doesn't want to engage me on this topic. I think he, like he said in his video, doesn't like the little bit of added effort to be vegan rather than just pick up whatever's on the shelf. He doesn't want to be forced to introspect seriously on that. And he knows a conversation with me is going to lead to either doing that introspection and changing, or just coming off like a absolutely ginormous piece of shit weak loser. And he knows that I am competent to do that, and he's not going to be able to fight his way out of one of those conclusions there. I think that is why he won't engage me.
Right. So people say, well, we kill animals because they're less intelligent.
We're 1-0 right now.
Than us. Okay, so we'll take a human being and make them less intelligent. Actually, Thomas Jefferson wrote about this. He was responding to a review, I think, of a book that had been published around the time of the American Revolution about the intellectual and artistic achievements of black people. Somebody had written a book detailing all kinds of achievements that were done, that were made by black people. And I suppose the implication was to be like, look what people are capable of. You should think differently about black people. And Thomas Jefferson wrote a response to this and said, like, no one's happier than I am to see this kind of thing. But we should not fool ourselves into thinking that this is any indication of their worth. I mean, just because Isaac Newton was more intelligent than, my mother, does that mean that he has more of a right to life, to not be abused, to not be killed? No, of course not. And in other words, intelligence is not a metric to
I don't like when philosophy people, like, because he's doing fine right now explaining NTT, he gets the idea, but I don't like when philosophy people distance themselves from their ideas in this kind of way. I want him to engage with his own criticism that he's putting forward right now, rather than talk about it in the abstract. I want him to put the spotlight on himself when he talks about top-down change versus individual action, right? I don't want it to be this detached, impersonal kind of thing. Like, if you talk to psychologists, they're going to tell you, among smart people, which I know Richard, who, of course, I love Richard, he was one of my closest friends. But, he'll tell you Alex is just a retard, which I don't actually agree with him on that. I think Alex is reasonably smart. And if you talk to, though watching Richard shit on him and call him a retard is very funny. And he's, I'm sure made a video about this. So you go look for that. But, if you talk to psychologists, they'll tell you that one of the most frustrating things and one of the most common things that they deal with when they're talking to smart people is rationalization, right? Rationalization, where a psychology person could describe it better than me, but it's like you get into a kind of abstract philosophical mode of thinking about something that really just takes you out of the picture, right? You really rationalize. I mean, I guess it probably as a defense mechanism. I think it just means, using your intellect to generate some kind of reasons for the thing you're doing, even if they're not actually what's motivating you. I think that's probably closer to how it's actually defined. But what it looks like when it happens, right? Because there's a bit of a difference between what something looks like when it happens and how it's defined, is, or at least a feature of it or whatever, is, it typically, when people rationalize, it becomes all impersonal. It becomes a big philosophical abstract thing that they're not really implicated in. It's all a theoretical question, right? So that's part of why I don't like the way that he's engaging with veganism here, talking about NTT, talking about top down versus bottom up, but never turning the spotlight on himself, which again I think is due to character weakness and wanting to persist in a kind of lazy lifestyle. Though I say that as the guy making the lazy video right now.
Determine your moral worth. But if that's the case, then when somebody says, well, pigs are less intelligent than us, okay, so what? Okay, so what is it then? Like, is it, oh, well, pigs are less self-aware? Okay, well, you can make a human less self-aware as well. You can imagine like a cognitively disabled human being. You can essentially start transforming a human being into a pig. Mm-hmm. You can give the human 4 legs. Is it okay to put him in a gas chamber now? No. Okay, well, let's lower the human's intelligence level. Definitely not. We definitely don't want to be putting people in gas chambers based on their intelligence level, do we? Okay, what if we give them a curly tail? How about now? Like, no. Okay, but you're slowly turning this human into a pig, and you get to a point where that human is now identical to the pig, and yet you still are like, no, it's still not okay to put them in the gas chamber. But that's what we're doing over here to this identical creature, So it's actually very difficult to determine what.
That's very interesting.
It's like the biggest challenge.
Very interesting. Almost like if someone generated that whole kind of line of reasoning, it would be useful to talk to them. Yeah. It's sort of like a thing you might think about something if you thought it was interesting, don't you think?
But because one of the reasons it's such a big challenge is because on another level, like, a human is worth more than a pig. Like, people just sort of intuitively know this. Now, I'm an emotivist about it.
Okay, what? Maybe I missed the context there, but you can obviously think one thing is more valuable than another, yet think both are sufficiently valuable that you shouldn't stab them or gas chamber them. Maybe I missed something you said. I don't want to go back and play it, but just, it's kind of obvious point to make there.
I think that when people make ethical judgments, they're just expressing emotion.
Like, one bird can fly higher than another, and both can be above the ground.
And so I think it's got a lot to do with how many.
And also being an emotivist. I mean, yeah, let's just hear what he says there.
Like, people just sort of intuitively know this. Now, I'm an emotivist about ethics. I think that when people make ethical judgments, they're just expressing emotions. And so I think it's.
When people make ethical judgments, they're just expressing emotions. So, yeah, I mean, it would be good to have Lance here, but yeah, part of the problem with some of these anti-realist views is that they have an implicit empirical claim in them, right? Like, people are doing such and such when they make moral statements. That's an empirical claim, right? And it requires some kind of empirical support. And I'm not under the impression that there's strong empirical work actually suggesting that that's what people, generally speaking, are doing when they make ethical statements. Now, I don't really think that. I guess I'm just saying you shouldn't be too quick to sign off on these views. Like, when I say I'm a subjectivist, in a sense I am, right? But I don't make the empirical claim, right? Like, subjectivism is moral statements are truth apt, at least one's true, the truth maker, or they're true, like their truth is stance dependent, or it depends, or is a function of, or is determined by, in some relevant way, our psychology, right? Just think about that. Moral statements are, at least one moral statement, moral statement's truth value is, right? So notice there's this constant reference to moral statement. Well, which moral statements? The moral statements of everyone, of the typical competent English speaker, right? That's actually going to be some kind of empirical claim there. So I'll tell you how my own statements are intended. Like, when I say that it's wrong to stab an old lady, I'm just telling you that I have a preference against it. But it turns into a different kind of thing if you start talking about what what everyone's doing or what competent English speakers are doing or whatever. And we get into meta-philosophical issues here. We'll start talking about ordinary language philosophy, how good an approach that is. Whatever, we'll ignore all that. But basic point is just, I think that emotivism comes with an empirical, a empirical kind of semantic thesis that is not substantiated. So you should be careful about accepting that position. Anyway, I don't want to focus on the meta-ethics stuff here. You guys can go watch that video I did with Joe and with Lance, responding to Alex talking to Sam Harris. And we do land more on Alex's side there. He's got a closer view too. Well, at least to Lance and I. Joe's a realist, but sorry, I said that with disdain. No disdain for Joe. Slight disdain for realism. But if you want to see the meta-ethics stuff, you can go watch that.
Got a lot to do with how many genes you share with people, and so I think that really it's got to do with like how much that pig kind of resembles a human to you. That's going to determine like how much you in fact value that pig. That's not a moral claim. That's not a justified. I think that's just what's happening. But if you start trying to say that no, actually, I think that a pig is worth less than a human, and I think that a dog is worth more than a rat, and I ask you why. Whatever reason you give, all you've got to do is apply that to a human being and see if that's actually the reason, And a lot of the time you find that it's not.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, that's that. I hope you all sort of understood my general angle with Alex. Just seems like a bunch of psychological distancing, not turning the spotlight on himself. The top-down versus bottom-up stuff is not a actual dichotomy. You have personal responsibilities, and we should do stuff from the top down. And he has not actually answered NTT himself, and I think that he's avoiding a conversation with me because I both can competently press him on it and will actually forcefully press him on it. So feel free to encourage, don't harass, but encourage him to actually have the conversation. If I'm just too much for him, he should talk to Avi. Talk to Richard, talk to whoever who's actually gonna press meaningfully on this issue and who understands how to run NTT reasonably well. And yeah, I'm working my ass off on a whole ton of stuff that ultimately is gonna be for you guys in a sense. So if you want to help fund that, I'm working on that shit all summer. Patron me a bit of money because that would make my life easier. I have zero income right now. Okay, that's all. Have a good day.